So everyone, welcome back to this final and concluding session of this two-day conference on successful whistleblowing channels. In this last panel, we will be discussing among some of the stakeholders in the whole process of the adoption of the directive, from trade union side, from civil society side, from funder side, and from legislative side or legislators side about the 5-year journey that we have been on together. And from Eurocadres' perspective, this is a journey which is very much linked to the launch of our platform, WhistleblowerProtection.EU. So when I briefed my fellow panelists here about what would be my starting point for today's discussion, I said that I will start with the speech that you probably heard many times before. So from Eurocadres' side, the journey of whistleblower protection started, I think, with the Congress of 2013, when we adopted a policy program, where we included our demand for a legislative proposal, or rather legal protection for whistleblowers on the EU level. This was in the policy program for some time before we actually started doing anything about it. And the way we came on to really being more engaged in the work was through our involvement in the Trade Secrets Directive. We were not at all dealing with the issue of whistleblowing in the Trade Secrets Directive initially, but it became the really hot topic towards the end. Before that, we had mostly been working on labor mobility, which was also an essential aspect of the Trade Secrets Directive. Eurocadres was already then part of a European platform, also with many national organizations, so very strong participation from French civil society, for example, which worked jointly on the Trade Secrets Directive, campaigning to stop some of the worst parts of it. Now, in the end, from Eurocadres' side, we were not really happy with the directive, but we were at least content with having gotten rid of some of the worst parts of it. And what actually came out in the end was a directive where the European Union first recognized whistleblowers as something which is useful for society at large. So that was indeed a bit of a win. But towards the very end also, it was very clear that this could be used as a way to put pressure on the legislator also to, okay, now you protected business, now let's also protect the people. And we worked together with the legislators on this. So that was the start, and that was why we wanted to get engaged on it. So for the last days of April in 2016, Eurocadres had summoned a meeting. First of all, mostly inviting trade unions, but then we realized that no, we have to expand the circle a bit. So we started contacting some organizations in civil society, which we knew had been involved also in the Trade Secrets Directive issue. And also, of course, talking with politicians, so some members of parliament and their staff. So that was the start for Eurocadres. And with the WhistleblowerProtection.EU, we created a shared platform, a common space for civil society organizations, trade unions, politicians, and academia to meet and work together. We provided a very basic secretariat function. So that was a little bit of a recap of how we came on to the question from Eurocadres' side. With us today, we have a very distinguished set of panelists. All of us have been deeply engaged in this whole issue, and I know that we'll have a very fruitful discussion. I have written a bit of a battery of a question, but I also said that there is a tendency for some of us to be a bit chatty and talkative sometimes. So I may not be able to go through all of this, but I think we'll have an interesting 1.5 hours together to look back at what we have accomplished. And what I would also like us to take out of this is a bit lessons learned. What can we learn from this experience for future coalitions, for example? So I'll start with giving the floor to Nick. So you were not in the first meetings from Transparency International when we had the platform, but I remember I was invited after having conversation with Transparency International people. I was invited to a workshop that you had in Brussels where you talked about how to put this issue on the table. I remember that you had not really been involved perhaps in trade secrets so much, but you talked about trying to put something on the table about public procurement. We were not sure really if there was a legal basis for a directive. You remember these times, Nick?
Yes, I do. And I'd like to thank Eurocadres for organizing this event. I'd like to first congratulate Martin for his tenure as president, and I'm wishing not the best of luck, and we look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Actually, in 2013 was when we actually started to sort of engage. I joined TI in 2014 after 6 interesting years in the European Parliament as a humble parliamentary assistant. And when I joined, 2 things were apparent. One is that the Trade Secrets Directive introduced some ambiguous language in one sole article that we felt should have been addressed more. But again, as far as lessons learned, the first lesson that I learned there is that without proper resources to try and engage and influence a process late in the game, which we did try to do unsuccessfully in the Trade Union Directive, needed to be addressed. 2, I came into TI in 2014 after the publication of a report by our International Secretariat and chapters that looked at whistleblowing laws in the then 8 member states. And of course, what we found was extremely discouraging, absolute patchwork of ineffective laws or no laws at all to address whistleblowing. And so we determined then that member states were not accepting their responsibility to protect whistleblowers, and an EU solution was on the table. So yes, indeed, we had earlier discussions, I think, with my predecessor and my former director, Carl. I was not in the room. I was working on a different file at the time. You know, and I have to be flexible, project-based NGOs and all. I was working on political integrity issues with the institutions, another issue that still needs to be addressed. And so, yeah, I do remember it. And I also remember one of the earlier points that really was a defining moment, I think, in our desire to address this issue was after LuxLeaks, we organized a joint meeting with MEPs and representatives from the Commission and from DG Home to discuss whistleblowing protection and what Antoine Deltour was going through. And I remember sitting in the meeting and us next to Antoine and a DG Home representative being more candid than I would expect, simply said that, don't worry, DG Home, simply said that there was no political will in Brussels to address this at an EU level, and there was absolutely no legal base. That was, I think, in 2016, June. So again, things have surely progressed. And one of the drivers has been obviously the leaks, the scandals from whistleblowers like LuxLeaks, like Panama Papers that drove the legislative agenda in Brussels. And then also, I would like to think that, although oddly, the migration crisis had a play in it, because in 2014, the DG Home became DG Home and Migration, became overwhelmed. Whistleblowing went to DG Just, and it became a freedom of expression issue. And they took it on with much more vigor than when it was in an anti-corruption framework alone. And then, of course, the third most defining moment of the entire campaign is with you and your initiative to launch the platform and bringing us all together where we still are together here. We'll come back together, I'm sure, again. But yes, yes, absolutely. Those were sort of the driving points to get the political will growing in Brussels to address this from an EU perspective.
Thank you, Nick. And I forgot to say also that you are indeed Deputy Director and Head of Policy and Advocacy at Transparency International EU. I'm going to try to remember to introduce Anna properly, because you will get the next question. So Anna Myers is Executive Director of the Whistleblowing International Network, which is based in UK, which when we started on this journey was still a part of the European Union, and now sadly is not. But you have been working in other realms than the European Union, and I remember the early discussions about the whole, I mean, even the legislative processes in the European Union. One aspect that has been really crucial in the whole process is the recommendation of the Council of Europe on the protection of whistleblowers. And there I know that you have been deeply engaged in this before. And I wondered if you could expand a bit on the experiences from the Council of Europe. How did we bring this into the European Union discussion?
The short answer is it's part of the legal acquis of Europe. So it was already being used, interestingly enough, by the Commission, certainly with new members or those who are wanting to become part of the EU. It's interesting to me because I remember having very early discussions with Pamela Bartlett-Quintanilla, who's unfortunately not here, but part of this gang that was pushing through and thinking about pushing through on an EU directive. And the concern was, is the EU's DNA actually really going to cope with whistleblowing well? Because from my perspective, the engagement we had over the years with the Council of Europe being its DNA being around freedom of expression and human rights, there was something that kind of clicked a little bit more naturally, and you didn't get stuck in the employment relation discussion. You talked a lot more about the public interest. I've worked in the field now for 20 years, so I've watched, or over 20 years, I've got to start counting. And I've watched how, and I'm a lawyer, and one of the things that I think is really important for those of us who've been working in the field is, as lawyers, we know that if you only have the law, you're basically screwed. And the law doesn't help you make a decision tomorrow in the workplace where you have to decide how you're going to report something. Most whistleblowers don't start off as whistleblowers. They only become whistleblowers when the reaction to what they're raising becomes problematic. Many people are very, very loyal to their organizations. They really do work hard to make it work internally, and they suffer greatly because they believed in their organization. And when they've somehow come across something that they thought their organization would handle well and they haven't, it can be very destructive for them. So I think over the years, what I've really noticed is if you can get the different parties who can make a difference involved, it becomes clearer and clearer to everyone how it will work in practice. So having the Council of Europe explore it, do the first report in 2010, Peter Omtzigt was special rapporteur at the Parliamentary Assembly, and he did a first report, which again showed the patchwork nature of the laws across the wider European family. There was a great law originally we've discussed earlier in Romania that came through in 2004 that looked marvelous, but nobody knew about it. Implementation and practice is where it really matters. And the Council of Europe kept sort of being almost pushed to address it again. Greco took on parts of it. So there was the anti-corruption evaluation and peer reviews where the Council of Europe was asking these questions, and the draft recommendation has continued to be used in those reviews. And then they, with the Snowden revelations and concerns about mass surveillance, they picked it up again, and they divided the two between mass surveillance issues and privacy and digital rights issues. and the protection of those who work within or around the national security field. So they looked again at improving the protection of whistleblowers. And when I was having those discussions with Pamela, we were sort of saying, would it make it worse to have an EU directive, or would it make it better? And when the discussion moved with, I think they started working in Vigilanza, was one of the ones that wrote the first paper that said, yes, by the way, there is a legal basis. So you can start to see how all these different elements were working towards making it almost impossible. And just sort of not so much a lesson learned, but a continuing journey we're on. It doesn't end. You don't get a law and it works in practice. You get a law where people start to use it properly. And usually what a whistleblowing law shows is where the gaps are pretty quickly. And you start to see where you need to put your next resources. So I think in the discussions that we had, some of them felt like we were having the same discussion that I'd had in 2009 with people, because it's a little mini journey you have to go on yourself about who a whistleblower is, what's the public interest, why are they in this vulnerable position, and how does the law support them, and who else should be in the room with them. So your union activity has been absolutely key, because that is the workplace. Those are the people that you need. I mean, I've worked in an environment where unions were slowly being dismantled. Regulatory authorities were taking light touch. So these other places that protected individual workers had been slowly removed. So a whistleblower law kind of comes back in to fill a gap, and I hope gets used by those parties. It does cause unions to really take it and run with it, and it does reinforce accountability within the structures of our society and our regulatory bodies, because we can go public.
Thank you, Anna. And I should also mention that Eurocadres is actually also an associate member of Whistleblowing International Network. Proud member, I would say. I'll continue with Virginie Rozière, which was really very, very crucial to where we are today. Virginie Rozière was the member of the European Parliament who was the rapporteur both of the own initiative report from the Parliament, which was really crucial in pushing the Commission, and also the rapporteur for the directive. I think we are all in agreement, very grateful to the way that you championed whistleblowers' interests in the whole process. So we are very grateful to have you here today. So what Nick mentioned in the beginning there was that the Commission was saying that there's no political interest and there is no legal basis. I heard here that Anna mentioned that we started to have this debate around, is there perhaps a way forward with the legal basis? We heard that Vigilanza was part of a drafting team, and the Greens EFA published a proposal for a directive which was based on employment, the social policy field in the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. Would you say that the Trade Secrets Directive was really the spark that got this process going, and how did it continue from there?
Well, first, I want to congratulate you, Martin, for the Aiossa at Eurocadres, and also wish you the best to Naila. And really, it was a pleasure to meet you and lead this fight with you. So thanks a lot. And I'm very glad and grateful to be here too, because it's good to remember sometimes what went well, and it's also inspirational, I hope, for all of us in our for the future, but I think we will end up with this. Well, maybe I will surprise you, but I'd say that the Trade Secret Directive is not the sparkle, but it's a turning point, definitely. The sparkle for me is, but maybe Camille Petit will say something about that, is the LuxLeaks case, because it started to put the Commission under pressure towards citizenship watch from the beginning, because Jean-Claude Juncker was personally involved in the LuxLeaks case. So this was really the starting point. And also for the Parliament, we grabbed the opportunity to move on tax evasion, and also we decided to award the Citizens Prize to Antoine Deltour, the whistleblower of the LuxLeaks case. And this then had an impact also during the Trade Secret Directive. I'll explain, because we awarded this prize as European Parliament to acknowledge his role for the good of European citizens, and at the same time started the trial on LuxLeaks in Luxembourg. And when we had the debate, the last debate in plenary for trade secret, which has been a very difficult file, we tried to not improve, but diminish the bad impact of this directive. And this was some kind of dilemma. Do you support a text you don't like, but is less worse that was in the beginning, or do you just oppose? But we wanted also to take advantage of trade secret to push forward the issue of whistleblower protection. And in June, it was May or June 2016, we were in this, I remember this very well, we were in the hemicycle in the parliament in Strasbourg, and with the debate on trade secret, and lots of members of the parliament were asking for whistleblower protection. We cannot have trade secret protection and not having whistleblower protection. And I got exactly the same answer as Unique. The commissioner who was defending the text said, well, for whistleblower protection, there is no opportunity, no need for it, so no political will, meaning, and no legal basis. So when you hear that, you will have to fight not only a legal fight, but a political fight. And at the same very moment, there was a trial in Luxembourg. So it feels a bit weird, and it's quite easy for the parliament then to put pressure on the commission saying, come on, we consider these people are useful to democracy and they're facing justice, it's unfair, and you do nothing to help them. So then started the political fight, but also we needed to have some expertise on our side. Of course, we had the support of all the stakeholders that were there, and this was really crucial. I think we will discuss it later. But also we had to get help from academics. So I'm very glad to see Mrs. Abezi here, who played a crucial role also in fighting back the commission, saying, come on, if you want, there is a way, there is a legal way, and we can find legal basis for that. And this was a 2 years fight. And we didn't know maybe the hardest part was in front of us, because of course we had to build the legal arguments and to discard this reason not to move on. But then we started to discuss the content, and there also, as we had seen in trade secret, you can pretend to have the best intentions in the world and draft a text which is not really achieving the purpose you pretend you want to achieve. So that's where I think we started to work very closely, as I've never seen, with all stakeholders and the parliament to try to take advantage of this with the own initiative report, and then the report in the parliament to have the best text we could. And the momentum we built at that time, I think, gave us a long-lasting advantage on the council and the commission, which allowed us to maybe reach a result we can be proud of in the end. And maybe I was also a young member with not that much experience, but this matter I've helped, because I was discussing with a friend, and she told me, well, maybe this time this very known quote of Mark Twain is applying, they didn't know it was impossible, so they did it. And I think it really applies to what we managed in the end.
Thank you, Virginie. So, Virginie, you mentioned that journalists had a very important part in this process, and that the LuxLeaks was perhaps the spark that started the process on the EU level. So I see that, Camille, you're getting ready a bit, because you see that the question is going your way.
Yes, this is for me.
Yes, indeed it is. So Camille Petit, Communications and Project Officer at the European Federation of Journalists, a European trade union federation which has been very active on the platform, and you have indeed really pushed for the freedom of speech dimension of this whole, and also the freedom of press, and the whole discussion around public disclosure that we've been coming back to times and over again through these past few days. So how did this journey start for you? Was whistleblowing part of the discussion before LuxLeaks case, and why did you think from your side that we needed to push for legal protection in the way that we in the end did?
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, well, actually, we also started to work on whistleblowers during the Trade Secrets Directive. I actually joined the EFJ right during the adoption. Yeah, so we are a federation, European Federation of journalists, trade unions, and professional associations. And so we're also involved in the Trade Secrets Directive, and we actually came up with the same conclusion that it was not protecting whistleblowers enough, and that we needed to actually work towards another legislative text to really have proper safeguards for whistleblowers. Why are whistleblowers important for journalists? Because they're actually sources for journalists. And that's why we actually put some effort into advocating for Whistleblower Directive together with the guys present here. So, of course, we were helped by the different scandals. I mean, we mentioned them, LuxLeaks, Cambridge Analytica, Panama Papers, OpenLux, but it's true that LuxLeaks was actually the most telling examples, because I think because it involved actually all the main stakeholders here. So we had journalists actually in the dock. Edouard Perrin was also accused for assisting a whistleblower. So he was actually working with a source. That's what he did, but he was accused for that. We had actually two whistleblowers, Raphaël Allais and Antoine Deltour, facing fines and prison terms. And we had somehow like government involved there with Luxembourg, somehow creating the framework for this to happen, like the tax rulings. We also had actually other events afterwards, and I would like to mention actually the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the investigative journalist in Malta, and actually Jan Kuciak in 2018. They both paid the highest price. Actually, they revealed corruption at the highest level of the state. I mean, of course, there was like international condemnation. It was quite big at the EU level because like journalists were being killed inside the European Union. But at the same time, you know, we're like, well, if you think that investigative journalists are so needed for our democracy, then you have to make sure that they can work with sources, and we need to protect those sources. And so we need to protect whistleblowers speaking to journalists. But at the same time, we had this discussion on this mandatory internal reporting. So, you know, there was some kind of contradiction there where actually everybody was talking about the LuxLeaks scandals and about, of course, the killings of those two journalists. But like in practice, when it came to actually advocate for them, it was not so easy anymore. And as Anna mentioned as well, like we had a recommendation, very good one, I think, protecting whistleblowers, including whistleblowers going to speak to journalists or media. This was signed by by all the EU member states. So they actually committed to implement this recommendation. But again, when it was actually time to put that in practice and have black on white, some protection for them, then we actually saw that it was a bit more difficult. But thanks to Virginie Rozière and actually the whole European Parliament was very, very progressive in that sense, and they came up with a own initiative report that was actually protecting whistleblowers, I mean, in the most advanced way. And yeah, so I mean, we actually took this, since we are a federation of trade unions, we had the two hats basically. So the more like trade union perspective and the journalist angle, freedom of expression angle. So we actually advocated on both sides, not making. Not talking about privileges for journalists, because this is not what it is about, but really like protect, like putting it, having this approach that this is really to protect freedom of expression, and in the end, it's actually the citizens benefiting from the different scandals and or revelations that Daphne Caruana Galizia or Jan Kuciak or Raphaël Allais and Antoine Détour actually disclosed.
Thank you, Camille. Now, we heard earlier here that Nick said that one of the reasons that Transparency International were not really involved in the Trade Secrets Directive initially was due to lack of resources. And I think it's time to direct the question to the funder in the room here. So, Peter Matjašič, you're going to have to try it yourself when you get the floor. Senior Program Officer, at least formally still, for some time at the Open Society Initiative for Europe. I remember meeting Peter the first time when you visited our Congress. We had a couple of really strange discussions where I didn't really understand what he wanted, because as a trade union organization, it's not very often that a funder comes to you and offers support financially. So that was a very new experience. And why did you do this, Peter?
Thanks a lot, Martin. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And as others said, congrats for your tenure. It's been a privilege to work with you, and I'm sure Naila will continue the good work. And I think Virginie mentioned this earlier. It's really important that today we just remind ourselves of the win that you have all contributed to. I mean, this is a milestone win. It has never happened before, that based on not having a political will and not having a directive in the Commission's program, a directive would become a reality. Of course, this was the work of a lot of different people and a perfect storm of a lot of different interests and a lot of sad moments, like we just heard of the killings of journalists and elsewhere, that made it happen. But every time it's about individuals who make things move forward. And the same was for us in Open Society. Of course, you know, Open Society is the big villain of, you know, progressive work in the world. And a lot of people misunderstand who we are and what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And in the end, it's really about individuals who come across a topic and get excited about it and manage to push the right buttons internally. And in our case, it was our belated deputy director who died of cancer last year, Susan Fredwell. She went to a meeting that another great ally and colleague who's not here with us today, but she is with Spirit, Juliette Descostet from the Fondation pour le Progrès de l'Homme, who is also funding work on whistleblowing in Europe. She organized a meeting for funders who were interested in topics related to whistleblowing and how this relates to the experience of the Trade Secret Directive and to generally speaking about this as a new topic, new for many funders, not new for all of you. And she came back very excited, and she, together with me, then pushed for this being part of our new strategy, 2017-2020. And I got the kind of dossier on my table, and I said, okay, how do we do this? So for me, I was always interested in citizens holding power to account. So for me, it was really looking at whistleblowing as a tool of democratic practice, which is, in my opinion, what it is. It's much more than that. But for me, it was interesting to understand this area of work and really go beyond this discussions of what is a whistleblower and what is a person who is leaking documents. And I wasn't interested in the legal part of that. I was interested in the practical part of it. How is it possible that if I see wrongdoing, and as a responsible citizen, I'm encouraged to report wrongdoing and I'm being punished for that? That was my entry point. Very maybe naive, but very simple, because I needed to build up an internal funding strategy, which is, you know, the opposite of you applying for a project. I need to have a strategy internally of what I'm going to fund and why. And in our good spirit of grant making that is flexible and open and is there for supporting the work of others, which is also something not always understood, because private philanthropy is such a black hole of, you know, why are you even engaged in these issues? Why it's your backstory? Why are you trying to control us? Although in this case, it was not about controlling anyone. It was just literally, we are interested, and I wanted to understand where the energy is. So I started, you know, doing a field analysis in different countries at the European level, understanding everything that was said earlier, where there's no legislation as a starting point, where there's contact with the journalists, what has happened, you know, basically taking it all in and then meeting people, meeting Anna virtually first and then in person, meeting Nick, meeting Camille and others, but especially meeting Martin, because he was behind this WhistleblowerProtection.EU. You know, it's the first thing I found online. So I was interested. I reached out. I went to the Congress of Eurocadres and was listening to it. Of course, for me, it was also the first time I was in a trade union setting. And I was just kind of very intrigued by a trade union working on a whistleblowing topic and bringing a different aspect to it. And then I think what is important for us as funders is that we have a lot of experience, and not always good ones, where we build up coalitions and we fund a coalition to do work. And we insist that a partner in a coalition gets the money, and then they will distribute the money among them and all that. And then everybody is focused on how to create a project and distribute the money and activities around that, rather than actually focusing on the big picture, which is getting the work done where there's alignment. So my approach is, learning from previous lessons, is I just wanted to understand what is the need of the key actors in this. So I went to one of the informal meetings that you had in the parliament, and I was happy because you were open. These meetings were public in a way almost, and open to everyone who was interested. So I think that's a very good and important value that you had. And I was just there, just listening. And then I quickly realized who are the players that actually move things forward, because there are people who like to have their opinion heard, and there are people who have the expertise, and then there are people who actually do the work. And sometimes one person can be all three, like Anna. Sometimes it's not the case. And then I needed to understand, okay, what does Anna need? Anna needs to set up shop. Anna needs to have WIN, not just as a general network, but something that will be there, sustainable in the long term. So obviously the grant we would give to her would be of a different nature than the grant that would be to Eurocadres, who did they need? They needed communication services, resources for improving that. Nick needed to have his time to just do the advocacy on a day-to-day basis. So we created a project around that. So it's tailor-made, if you will, but not because I said so. It's because I listened to them and I heard what they needed. So my contribution is very small. I was always in the background because I needed to just be the supporting system for them to do their job. And it's not about open society being part of this. We have been, and we are proud that we have been, but it wasn't for us to put a flag in and say, oh, we are going to advance this work. No, never. And I think that's important. And that's why it worked. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you. And I will then turn to Nick. So some of the lessons of the platform, I heard Peter mentioning that we were very open in the beginning. We also did not have this role of distributing resources or anything. What would you say were key factors in our process that made us successful?
Sure, and before I turn to our successes as a coalition, I do want to take the opportunity to thank Virginie for her excellent work. She's one of the most adept canny negotiators I've ever seen in Brussels. So good job. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the Commission, who put out a far more ambitious proposal than I ever would have dreamed of. I remember having conversations, and you alluded to before, if I was a cabinet member of Eurova, I would have put out a standalone regulation based on the protection of the EU financial interests because it's an election year. And they did the exact opposite and surprised the hell out of me. So I'd like to thank them as well. Successes. I mean, again, I think that this served as a sort of a building model that we've used in all other coalitions that we've formed since then, because it was the first time, and of course, as an NGO, you're always in coalitions. I mean, I'm on so many coalition Google emails, and you just make your head spin. But this was the first time that we diversified. And that diversity was the matter. You know, it was the key. It was the first time we had worked with trade unions, and we would not have worked with trade unions unless you had approached us. It was the first time we worked with journalists associations, and we would not have done so if this coalition hadn't formed. And I think that diversity mattered. And it would academics? No, we never. I mean, occasionally, we'd read something cited as an evidence-based, reason for why this policy recommendation works. But the diversity helped because it brought skill sets that were different. I'm a lobbyist in Brussels. I know how to try to influence legislative process in Brussels. Anna has the expertise. Vigilance has the free legal advice that I always used to rely on throughout the whole process. Does that legal base make sense? Can I shop that around? And again, also relying on the case studies of the journalists. Because that was instrumental. There was a lot of horrible things that happened over 4 years that we would have to cite and say, this is why we need this. Networks. The diversity came with different networks. We could branch out. I'm blessed with being a part of an international movement that I can rely on 22 national chapters, which I did. But everyone also has member-based organizations, and that really helped. And so in the member states, but also in Brussels. I didn't talk to the employment commissioner in my entire time. I had my usual interlocutors, and so we could rely on that. And then what goes back to what Peter said, and what Martin also said is the flexibility. Informal coalitions are excellent. And as an example, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I often am, in the entire multi-annual existence of WhistleblowerProtection.EU, I think the only joint statement we ever had were 3 bullet points. Yeah, there's a reason why we did that. Because oftentimes coalitions get bogged down in these little, well, where's that, where's my, because again, it was diversified. So everyone coming from a different angle, but we all agreed on 3 bullet points, and that was enough. And then we could rely on using that platform and gather the forces when necessary, direct them where they needed to go at a particular moment in time. And I think that was absolutely key. And then again, if you're talking about EU processes, you need to take a dual approach. You need to be able to work with members or coalition partners in the capitals, because the council will always be a problem. But you do need boots on the ground in Brussels that know how the machine works. And so I think that was also instrumental, because I could rely on feedback from what was going on in Germany or France, from either chapters or partners, or even MEPs would let me know, this is what's going on. Perm reps, not so much, unreliable to give you the right information of what their member state position is. But also people in Brussels, like, where we had advocacy meetings and coordination. And I think that was also part of the success of the coalition, which I'll stop there because I could ramble on more.
Yeah, and I think that the information sharing was also really, really key to the success. So we had frequent meetings in the very end of the process of the adoption of the directive. It was several times per week that we met even. It was a bit absurd, but very helpful. And I think indeed that not having to we did one attempt at another text, and that was to make, we wanted to have a common reaction of the directive proposal. And let's say that was a lesson learned, that we had done a very good job in not trying to do joint text before that, more than these bullet points. So we quickly learned from that a lesson that it was indeed the diverse multi-stakeholder approach that made this platform work. Nick, you mentioned also the capitals, and here I want to turn my attention to Virginie again. Now, we had some fights in the whole process, and from the trade union perspective, I'd say that the mandatory internal reporting, as we called it, which was the provision in the directive proposal from the Commission that you first had to go to employer before you could go to a competent authority. So if you wanted to blow the whistle on something relating to environment, you couldn't go to your Environment Protection Agency without first going to the employer, as an example. And that was something that we really wanted to get rid of, because we thought that there was already this right, and it would kind of make things a bit worse. And here we had to work very much on trying to swing the council And we had a little bit of a discussion yesterday over dinner, and I think we are still not exactly sure what happened, but can you share some thoughts from your side on what you think was key factors in the way that we swung this in the end?
Yeah, for the people who maybe don't know the exact story and the way institutions are working, this is the last chapter of the story. It's final negotiation with the parliament advocating in line with Eurocadres and all NGOs and all stakeholders from civil society to have no mandatory internal reporting. This was the parliament's position, and in front of us we had the initial position of the Commission and also the Council being the representatives of member states and governments. And usually in this situation, the Parliament loses. It's almost always the case. So we were starting with bad odds on our sides, but in the end, we ended up with this. So how did that happen? Well, I have no clear answer on that. But this was very difficult also because the blocking minority in the Council was built around France, our member state, and Germany, being the two biggest, strongest, most powerful countries in the Council. So you say, okay, this won't be easy. But we fought, all of us, and the coalition, all the work done was a basis, a very powerful basis, and it's very, you know, you all have strong tempers, and you need that to do all your jobs. But in this coalition, everyone was working for the general interest with the egos on the, seen from my perspective. I don't know it was inside, but everyone was aligned for the same objectives, and this was very useful. And in the end, as you said, sharing information, knowing trying to know what was going on in the Council. You put pressure through your national representatives on governments, on national parliaments. Also in the Parliament, we tried to do it as well, and by putting pressure through members of the Parliament on then national governments, especially where the progressive were in charge of national governments. And in the end, countries one after the other switched, and the blocking minority was shrinking. The Commission also changed its mind. I think in the end, we had the elections coming and the end of term coming as well, and this was also increasing political pressure. I think it played an important role. Also, I'd say in the negotiation, showing that you won't give up, and in the end, if they don't give up, there will be nothing. And what was at stake also for the Commission was to have a balanced outcome of these 5 years, and without the directive going through, this would have been a bit unbalanced. So it's a bit of a kind of bluff, you know. You have to show you're strong-tempered. And also the way well, I remember there was petitions to build awareness and mobilization and among citizens in public opinions. And that's true that when you arrive in the trialogues meeting and you put all these packs of signatures on the desk of the Council, well, this is something, and this is all citizens wanting you to change your position. So also it helped. And but I wouldn't be able to say which part of all this chain of efforts of work was. This is maybe all of it together, and I think it was a very special moment. And for people in the audience, don't think we all self-satisfied, because I don't think it's the temper of the people here. It's just that was a big adventure, and sometimes with an happy end, which it's always good to enjoy.
Yeah, I think from European trade union perspective, I mean, we're used to having good relations, good dialogue with the European Parliament and the MEPs, but when it comes to the trilogue negotiations and the Council, that's indeed where we lose out. So we get support from the European Parliament, and then in the end we lose at the Council. And this did not end in that way. So it's a bit of a different experience in that sense. I think I want to go a little bit deeper in this process, because here I think also the European network and also the multi-stakeholder approach was really important. For example, you mentioned Germany. And here, pointing to Camille, I remember we had indeed the elections coming up, the European elections, and the lead candidate in Germany for the S&D group happened to be also the Justice Minister of Germany. I remember that this was something that we used to put some pressure, especially in German media. So here I remember that it was really crucial that we got the help of journalists in Germany to push this discussion. Of course, you cannot just send out instructions to journalists what they should write from the European trade union representing journalists. But I remember that you were at least part of informing your journalist colleagues in Germany about the need to push for this. Do you remember anything about this process?
Well, my memory on Germany is not so good, but I can say that we actually relied a lot on our members, so the journalist trade unions and professional associations in different member states, to put pressure on the government. And as Nick said, we all had our strong points or strong contacts here and there. So either in the capitals or in Brussels, or some MEPs also, that we were asking our members to advocate for our position to the different stakeholders. Because at some point we were like in this situation where we're like, wait, who are we protecting again? Like, are we protecting companies or whistleblower here? When we had this very strong debate on this internal mandatory reporting. So we ended up with a kind of compromise, as it's always the case at the European level, and some kind of minimum standards. And now we are trying to actually improve those standards. And I'm actually now only talking about the public disclosures, because as it was mentioned earlier today and yesterday, so now we have okay, so this we got rid of this mandatory internal reporting, but we still have some restrictions when it comes to public disclosures. So public disclosure is so talking to, in particular, to a journalist or a media, is restricted to imminent dangers, or actually when journalists whistleblower think that there is potential concealing or destroying of evidence, so that this is not really satisfactory for us. But I would say that at best, this directive doesn't harm, because there were leaks before and there will be leaks after this directive. And I'm referring now to the discussions we had actually yesterday with the investigative journalist, Spanish investigative journalist. At worst, it will actually dry up journalist sources, but I don't think it will make any whistleblower actually feel more confident to speak up to a journalist. So that's a bit my assessment of the directive as it is right now. And actually the Germans journalists trade unions is also trying to push for some improvement there, and we will rely a lot on our members for the work that is coming now, like for the next couple of months.
Thank you, Camille. And I remember another part of history here when we're talking about the Netherlands earlier today. I remember a lot of exchange over email with Rick van Steenbergen about what was going on in the Dutch government and their position. And Anna, I remember that you were involved in stirring up some controversies in the Netherlands. Can you tell us about this?
Yeah, Just a very quick backup, because I just thought I should explain Whistleblowing International Network. We have two forms of membership, so associate members and core members are the legal advice, nonprofit legal advice centers around the world that have dedicated their time to advising and protecting whistleblowers, so public interest legal perspectives. But again, those organizations only survive by working in their country much more widely, have always worked with unions, have always worked with journalists, will help get the information out there, will campaign, because it's not just the law that will protect whistleblowers, as I said earlier. And so WIN's ethos is to have that core expertise be at the center of it, and it's an open expertise in terms of collaboration, but also to have associate members who represent digital rights, transparency, anti-corruption, union rights, because they're all part of the WIN network. What was astonishing to me was, even though nationally you're still fighting for corners, really, at this regional international level, the egos were left outside the room. There was a real understanding that there's no way one party could make this happen. Nick is the lobbyist par excellence, so I would just ask him, send me lists of who I should write to. I would send him paragraphs of what he should put in his emails, and they were coming at all of these players from very different angles with similar messages. What we did have was a red line. We didn't necessarily agree with what everything should be in the directive, but we knew that we came together on what definitely needed to be removed. I didn't get any of the processes in the EU, and it remained, and I don't even think I talked to you, Virginie, directly. I just let that happen. We said hello, we knew of each other, but like we were doing different things. But what was so interesting to me was this Dutch element, because as they told me, the Dutch play this role, and they were doing it beautifully, of kind of saying, what do you mean? It isn't a red line, it isn't mandatory, it's in there properly. So I had bizarre conversations with the permanent representation there. And then with our members, so Rick I've known for years, and he was able to feed certain information back and put back through the Dutch system. We started to, and as I mentioned earlier, with the recommendation that eventually came out of the Council of Europe, it was Peter Omtzigt, a very active member of parliament in the Netherlands, and also a PACE member. So we were suddenly calling on him, or he was asking us what questions should we put to parliament. And so we were starting to stir trouble. And at the last minute, I wrote a letter to the Ministry of Justice, who I think had the National Security and Justice title. And then I CC'd every other justice minister, and I wrote it from the board of WIN, which represented a number of parties, and basically said that they were being irresponsible, that the red line went against everything that they had already had in the Netherlands. And I just sent it off. I felt like so much we were just sending off and hoping they'd land. And then I got a call on the Friday before the Monday, where everything was decided, from the permanent representation, and I had to explain it again. It's like the penny finally dropped, that although there was reasonableness in kind of saying people should, people do raise things internally, there's an unrealistic view that employers will behave responsibly. And the reason that whistleblowing is about accountability, not just an individual's right to speak up. It's not just about an employer's right to run their business. It's about the accountability of all these institutions. If those who make decisions do not feel that those decisions will be questioned, it creates an information control mechanism. And we've seen it too many times, where unless you have the ability to go directly outside to a regulator, and I believe now, more importantly than ever, going to journalists with information, because they will take their role very seriously and check out the information and do it properly, then we are not holding power to account properly. And so it was very interesting to me to get a call where someone was actually seeming like they had to talk to me about this, because clearly having my approval wasn't mattered, which made no sense to me. But it was a brief moment where I think the penny had dropped somewhere. And that's where the journey of understanding whistleblowing, it's a simple concept, but the nuances in different power relationships make it complicated. And to keep going back, you can see the penny dropping as people have made this journey together, even within our coalition. So what was just exciting, and by the end we were having daily conversations and just sending information around to all of us so we could just do it the way we needed to do it, was the fact that we had a goal, that we knew it was important, and that we pulled out every single network contact that we thought would be interested, and they came to the table. There was a letter from Greco to the Commission or to the Parliament. There was the Group of States Against Corruption, which is its own organization within the Council of Europe, and it's the anti-corruption review mechanism for the Council of Europe. So there are 49 rather than 47 member states, including the US. So they have an interesting role to play. So there was interest from outside the Commission that was sort of obviously didn't have a role in and outside of the EU wouldn't have a direct role and could start to say this is part of the European community. It matters to us.
Thank you, Anna. We are just a minute or two away from moving into the Q&A part of this session, but I want to direct my last question to Peter before we open that part, and that is to give you the opportunity to give us some thoughts of what would be your recommendations for future work of this, because what I said in the beginning is that we're trying to learn some lessons also. What did we do well? And what could we have done better?
Thanks. Yeah, so now with the benefit of hindsight, you always go back and see what would you do differently if you could. So I would say for all of us, including myself, we would fight harder to create national coalitions in parallel to the excellent European coalition already, because we kind of missed the train. We were kind of so focused on let's do things at the European level, let's get the directive through first, that we kind of then paused and said, oh, we will sequence it. We come then afterwards to the national level. And then COVID happened and we were screwed, pardon my French. But, it was a bit difficult because there was, we spoke about that. There are certain countries like Spain, like Germany, like Italy, where it was complicated, where trade unions, even some might be in the room, were holding back at national level while they were very supportive at European level. And that's the truth. And it's been problematic for us. We did not fund only at the European level. We also went and chose 3 countries that we saw were key because of their size and because of the fact that they either had protection and they were good at, we thought it would be a good test case to actually then transpose the directive very quickly, which is Italy, because we helped support some groups. I mean, they were doing excellent work and not much was needed, but you just need a little bit of push to help bring the initial law into place, and then to work on the transposition, which is a very different if you do it from a high bar than if you do it like in Spain or Germany where there's nothing. And we learned the hard way about how sensitive each national context is and how you need to operate. For example, I'm lucky enough to speak both German and Spanish, and I live in Barcelona, so I understood the complexity. But when you speak to Germans in general, you have to learn that everything they look at is through legal context. They understand it from the dot first and not from the big picture. And you need to kind of redirect your thinking of how you're going to approach them. So in Germany, we support a combination of someone who represents whistleblower voice directly, someone who is Transparency International brings the anti-corruption accountability perspective, and someone who can do and has done successfully strategic litigation around this, so that they could use the more legal ways of going about it, right? In Spain, it was completely different. In Spain, we had so many cases, Ana Garrido, Luis Segura, and Carlos Macias, and others who have been suffering for a while because of absence of any legislation. And first, we invited them to the table, but then you just need to manage those individual stories. And the whistleblowers are not always going to be your best allies or experts. Why? Because they are the victim at the same time. Their stories are very important to change the narrative, but they also might be a stumbling block. So you need to keep that in mind. And I think we did that, you did that successfully at the European level, of seeing how you can manage and how you can bring Antoine and others to share their stories so that they can move the needle. But at national level, we didn't necessarily succeed in that because a lot of times there's friction, there's competition between organizations, there's different interests, and that's all normal. But it's also a very different context in how policy is made at national level. And sometimes we, from the European perspective, don't understand that. and don't really know enough about that. So I would suggest, starting earlier with national transposition, being more dedicated. And from my side as funder also, I don't know how to do it differently to make sure that this line of work would continue to stay, because I'm afraid that within the transformation that OSIFE is going through, that this is going to fall off the table. And with myself leaving, that also leaves an empty slot in terms of somebody who got it and was promoting it, right? And it's not about making it important about me, because it's not about that, but you need to just know people who get it and who can then use their soft skills of finding money internally to support this work. So I think we all have a bit of lessons learned in that sense, but all in all, it's a big win. But let's look at also, like Camille said, what is not okay within this directive, and start from there. So yes, let's praise ourselves and celebrate the success, but let's also look forward and see how much is still missing and where the European level can help. And now you have the Commission as an ally, because it's in their interest to have this done. So your role also changes, because previously you were lobbying the EU institutions to do something that you wanted. Now you have to use them to help you, or you can help them get what they want at national level. So it's again, switch of mentality and ship. And that's not easy to do. And dealing with your own members in the member countries is also not going to be an easy process. So that's where now the energy needs to go. And that takes time. But I think it's, again, by building the trust, we managed to help. I don't know, we saw that, not everyone knew each other. So what do you need? You need a meeting where people come together in person to just chit chat, have a nice food, have a nice evening together, to then be able to then go hard together on certain things, right? So that is missing at national level, and that's something that needs to be focused on.
I think you're absolutely right there, and I think that was, that's also part of the experience of working with the council. It's easy to have the dialogue with the parliament, but when it comes to the member states' governments, we need to be in the capitals, and then we need to have built these coalitions on national level already. So I think it was impressive that we managed to get where we did with the capitals in the end, without having done the homework really on the national level before that. So with those words, I would like to open the floor also for some questions from the audience, both in the room and online. I think we have a hand over here. Vigilance. Yes.
Thank you so much. It's just such a, first of all, very emotional and very pleasing moment. I don't have a phone because my bag was stolen, but if I did, I would have taken a picture. But I really, truly want to say, everyone on this table, you have been absolutely essential. And I think for people outside the effort, maybe it's not visible or clear enough that this was truly not a small feat to reach this point. And I think you all mentioned different factors, legal and political, but also cultural, where the word even whistleblowing does not exist in some member states, because all that exists is snitch, informant, et cetera, So this was not just sort of a front of legal basis or obviously political games. This is really sort of shifting a whole culture around what do we even think? Why do we even think that whistleblowing is something positive, legitimate, something that merits protection? And to this point, I think, precisely to Virginie's point on how important also LuxLeak was, because they found themselves in an absolutely paradoxical situation. They were awarded with an award of the European citizen by the European Parliament while they were facing prosecutions at the national level from Luxembourg, which was considered to be a country with developed whistleblower protections, right? And that sort of shows in a way the complexity of all of this. So, I mean, I could ring you praise all day, because absolutely it's been crucial. And I think indeed, in terms of more, I just wanted to add more comment rather on the lessons learned part. because it is quite exceptional what has taken place. In the European Union, we have official mechanisms, so-called citizens' initiatives, where citizens can take initiatives to have laws. None is not even without even having that legal architecture, this bottom-up approach of the movement that has shown, it's actually exceptional in terms of the success of building a coalition. So in terms of a few points of lessons learned, I think one thing that we haven't pointed out to, and of course, in a way, they're not even in the room, is the business sector, are the companies in the industry. I think for me, in a way, as a one lesson takeaway is, if there is truly interest from civil society and trade unions to do exactly what has happened, to be prepared and to be 2 steps ahead, because now they're catching up. Right? And you've already set the rules of the game, and you've already set the parameters around which we're going to have this discussion. Of course, in this regard, it is extremely helpful that at the European Commission, we have officials who have generally, I think, tried to their best possible way within the legal constraints that they face, they're not small, to promote the spirit of the whistleblower. And they continue to do so as they face extreme pressure from different lobbying groups in terms of how implementation should work. So I think in this regard, also understanding that spirit of the law that it's intended, it kind of goes, it's important. And the last thing I think in terms of communication also with member states as a takeaway, I just want to echo the point that of course, not all the work can be done simultaneously, but for any future initiative, that needs to be as much as possible simultaneous work in Brussels and national capitals, just sort of that another law that's a very good law is not perceived as yet again Brussels telling us what to do. Because then there's a little bit more resistance, but even also maybe from civil society, because it's seen as perceived as extra work, not as much as this is something that is fundamentally relevant or good for us. So I don't have any questions, but I just had long comments. But really, thank you to all of you for being absolutely crucial to having this very game-changing law. I think not just for whistleblower protection, but for a lot of things in European law, which we're yet to see what kind of beast you've unleashed. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a couple of innovations in this law, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens in future court cases, how it will be interpreted and how it will actually stand up the rights that we have given. Thank you for your comment, Vigilanza. So, yes. Is there a comment perhaps for the commission?
Well, no, I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists. I mean, it feels like the good and happy ending of a movie where we are arriving to the deadline of transposition. And just wanted to say that I joined the team in 2017 when the petition arrived actually to DG Justice. And I think one of the main success factors is that beyond the legal discussions on internal, external channels, the objective of everyone was a good objective. I mean, it's protecting people who are actually denouncing corruption and legal breaches. So I think that was the major factor for everyone, be it the Parliament, Commission, Council even, to go ahead. And also to explain that I think also that if you see the timings of the petition, the proposal, the adoption, it's almost a record time for the good or for the bad, for the people who were working in this file. But indeed, from the proposal to the adoption of the directive, I think it was less than a year, which is absolute record for the Commission in terms of timing. I think the trialogues until 2 in the morning helped to get some agreements between the Parliament and the Council and smooth positions as well. But it was a very successful story for our side as well. And I also want to underline what Peter said now, the role of stakeholders now should a bit shift from lobbying to supporting the Commission in the transposition and in the checking of the implementation of the laws. We have now next year a study being launched to check how member states will transpose the directive
and we have to present, I think, in 2023, a report to the Parliament on the transposition, and 2025, a report on the implementation. So my praise here is to say this is not the end of a good movie, it's just part one. And we hope that part two would be even better and with also a happy ending. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have seen many bad sequel movies, so I hope that this will not be one of those. But indeed, I would really like to echo also that what the commissioner was saying, what Christelle was saying, that we can also help with being ears on the ground on how things are moving in the member states. And I would like to underline that, us on the panel here and our respective organizations can in that case help with the contacts with the Commission to get the message across if things are not moving in the right direction. So I see also a hand back there. Rick, please, you have the floor.
Yeah, Martin, I'm sitting here because you have to leave. Yeah, you hear me? I'm sitting here at the back because I have to leave at 1 sharp to get my plane. But I wanted to say how important it is that people are dedicated to the subject. Anna mentioned the influence of the Netherlands in influencing Germany and France to go further with the directive. And at the moment, there were 2 very dedicated civil servants at the ministry, Lydia Schut and IMS, who very much promoted the subject within the ministry. But some months after the directive had been approved, they retreated from the ministry to enjoy their well-earned pension. And now there are new people at the ministry and new people at subject, and that clarifies why it is so much more difficult now to cooperate with the ministry than at that time. It's a pity that at least in the Netherlands, the ministries don't have any collective memory. I noticed that time and again. And so every time again, I think also when we go further with the directive and the implementation, the transposition, you have to look where there are dedicated persons in what country and in what gremium. And I'm glad that at the table there are some very dedicated people, and I think it's important that we build up our knowledge and let it not disappear as is the case at the ministries.
Thank you, Rick. Do we have another question or comment? Yes.
There's no question. I just wanted briefly to say that our work will continue actually even beyond the transposition of the directive, because some of us here have started to work on SLAPs. SLAPs stand for strategic lawsuits against public participation, and we will try to protect whistleblowers also and journalists actually also through this very specific type of reprisal, which is the legal way, so litigations. Because we actually see that it's actually widespread in the European Union that activists, whistleblowers, journalists are also facing those abusive lawsuits with the aim actually not to win a legal case, but to silence them, to intimidate them, to exhaust their resources. And the work has started, and we will continue also with the support of OSIFE. And so we will, for sure, we will actually use our work, our experience during the Whistleblower Directive also to carry out this work on SLAPs. So yeah, we still have some work ahead of us, and actually this work we will do that actually together again.
Absolutely, and this is something which is also on the radar of Eurocadres. We have been part of this coalition with a joint statement, a much longer statement than 3 bullet points, I'd say, and still somewhat successful. The justice ministers had a lunch discussion not very long ago on the topic, and we hopefully that will lead to some kind of discussions also about the directive. Let's see. Indeed, we will have to continue working on this together, and for Eurocadres side, it's something that we have been a bit involved in, and there is the public consultation also on this, which is I think really crucial for as many of us as possible to actually respond to. So from Eurocadres side, I hope we'll be able to send out some information to our member organizations about this. I will hint to Naila that this will be a good idea. I'm not going to be the one deciding, but so we are now a very few minutes away from the closing. So if there are no other questions or comments from the floor, I would like to start a concluding round. I don't see anything there. So then I will do that. And I will do that by coming back a little bit to what Christelle said a bit before here about that we did this in a record time. I think this is something we really need to underline and remember, that this was, it says the recap of the 5-year whistleblowing journey or Whistleblower Protection EU in the title. And to have a perspective of 5 years before it was at all on the table, no political will, as we said before, to actually having not only a directive in force, but also nearing the end of transposition. It's quite remarkable. So I think we should really, again, congratulate ourselves for a good job and having worked well together there. Just to underline, because Virginie mentioned the petition and Christelle also mentioned the petition, and here I just want to point out that there were 2 different petitions that we did from Eurocadres. And the first one we targeted directly to the Commission. So there we went to the head of to the Director General of DG Justice and handed over the petition, which we called on the Commission to put forward a proposal on a legal protection for whistleblowers. So that was the first one. And the second one was the one which we handed over to Virginie, and which she later also handed over to the council, and which we understand also the council took to the COREPER meeting, which is the internal negotiations of the council. So it's been both in the trilogue negotiations with the council and also even in the internal negotiations of the council. So I think there was good impact there for those papers. So they were 2 different petitions there, and we worked together with WeMove.EU on the second one there. So we got over 100,000 signatures, and we also had Blueprint for Free Speech. They had been running a petition for several years, which had amounted to over 180,000 signatures. So with over 250,000 signatures, it was a good thing to bring to the negotiations, I would presume. So I'm going to open then with a concluding round. Let's see, who wants to start off? Do you want to start off, Anna?
I'm at a trade union conference, so I really want to say, going forward, your commitment and your engagement with this issue will be absolutely key nationally. The EU Whistleblowing Monitor, which again, we've had support from Eurocadres and Transparency International Europe to carry on doing. It's now an independent monitor, and it really was something put together very quickly to keep the momentum up, to have somewhere where we're tracking progress, and it can be used to shame as well as to complement the member states that are moving forward. I think this is something from my experience, and as I've said, I've had the same conversations. As Rick said, when people leave a ministry, the people come in, have never seen whistleblowing, haven't looked at the portfolio, and you have to have those conversations again. So there's work to do. It will continue to be needed to be done. And transposition for me is the first stage. This is where it really matters nationally. We'll see some of the cases not working. We'll see some of them, and those are the ones that we use to reinforce the law and reinforce engagement. Whistleblowers survive when they have a community. Staying isolated is the way that power would like people to remain. They can discredit them, and then it's hard to then rejoin them and rehabilitate these people, because it is hard to take on someone whose reputation has already been trashed. So this is something that requires a bit of bravery and courage from all of our parts to look past the individualization of the whistleblower to the information that they've tried to impart, and to discover for yourselves whether it's a valid issue that you as a union want to take forward, and then protecting whistleblowers as what we have said, a democratic accountability mechanism that we need right now. So thank you very much. I hope that you will follow the EU Whistleblowing Monitor and get in touch anytime you have any questions.
Thank you, Anna. Peter?
So I'll just continue on that note. I think it's really important to continue remain vigilant. And this coalition did, I don't know if it's part 1, part 2, whichever part, but the work is not done. And I think that's also my message to funders, my own and others, that you need to remain committed, because it's not just getting a shiny policy win, which was very important, very crucial, as we heard, and groundbreaking, but at the same time, it's just that. It's the first step in then getting the legislation. And then for whistleblowers themselves, protection is the first point of departure. It's really then about making sure that we go behind the stories that they tell us and hold power to account for real, that we can achieve the change that we want to see in the world, right? And just a final message to Eurocadres that I mentioned to Martin before, and I think Naila has now a great opportunity of having a certain credibility that you have gained in these years in the EU bubble, but also internationally, on being part of this important win. It gives you credo within the trade union movement that was not always open to work on this. And it's something that now you should take this shiny object of this win and run with it, and it will be helpful because you have open doors to institutions and partners, and it's about nurturing now this coalition for other relevant work, be it on anti-slaps or other things where it could be useful, and help translate that, and all of you who are here from national delegations, to really bring that home to your country and share the win and be proud of the win that you have achieved as being part of this internationally, but also try to get that win nationally. I think that would be very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Camille?
Well, actually, my previous comment was could have been my concluding remarks. So I would just add that it's been a pleasure working with you, and I look forward to continuing the work together. Thank you.
Thank you. And Virginie?
Sorry, well, I'll make mine also some of the remarks of Peter, transposition and building. Well, we've set up a strong basis, strong foundations at the European level, but now it's up to national organization to build the building, and it's still lots of work to do, and it won't be easy. So we have to be committed, and glad to hear also that the Commission will be following closely, and that we can also work together to make sure member states just make real what we expect. We expect it through this directive. And second, I will have a special word for Eurocadres, because in this coalition, which was key, it was something very, very special what happened. But there are usual suspects that you expect on this kind of file, NGOs working on transparency, on anti-corruption or freedom of expression, kind of naturally involved, but it was very more than useful to have social partners involved there, because in some cases of whistleblowing, sometimes trade unions or trade union representatives were not that clear on if they were supporting or not. And in the implication, the commitment of Eurocadres was very, very key for progressive members of the parliament to say, come on, we have social organization, trade unions with us. And this completed the picture of all the support of the directive. So indeed, this was very key. And also it's, as Peter said, something you can build on for the future, because social partners will be also very crucial in the national works for transposition. So congratulations and keep on.
Thank you, Virginie. And Nick.
Well, I can only echo these sentiments. I'd like to thank everyone that's been involved in this journey, but particularly Martin and Eurocadres, who brought this all together, I think. You were the driver for the whole 5-year experience. And apparently there's a sequel. My character may not be killed off, although it usually is after the publication of any law in the official journal, where I get to throw the baton to my national chapters. It was 5 years, it was in record time, but it wasn't at the same time. And that's why I think it's important for the diligence, because I remember in that time period between pre-proposal and trilogues was a lengthy process. It took a long time, and then record speed right before an election, we got to get this done. But we needed that time. I had a meeting for a rapporteur of an opinion of your own initiative report, who was from Poland, conservative, in the very early days when he was drafting this report, and he asked me why in the world would he draft a report that would support going back to a Soviet-style informant system. Yeah. Fast forward 4 years later, and he voted in favor of the directive. Yeah, you need that time, which is why it's so important now engaging to people, because as Anna alluded to, whistleblowing is complicated. There's a lot of nuances. And thank God I had experts like Anna to help me in my chapters, and Tom from GAP explain this to me. So I do encourage everyone to have those conversations now, begin reaching out, because we're in transposition, and then there's implementation, and that's where it's going to be crucial. And so again, I can just only feel very blessed that I've been part of this. Looking forward to continuing. Maybe next year we'll be here again. And thank you again, and particularly to you, Martin.
Thank you. And a big thank you from me also to all of you for this. This is a 5-year journey coming to an end. This will also be my last gig as president of Eurocadres. I was actually not president of Eurocadres when we started this. It's already Naila. So I'm already in the program as former president. So I was very relieved to hear the words of Naila in the beginning, that we are indeed going to see more of Eurocadres on this issue. So from my side, a very big thank you to everyone on this panel for your participation in this, and also from my side to all of you in the room who have been active on this. This is a journey that we've done together. It's not only us on this table, it's something that we did together. And what has been said many times from this side now is that we need to continue working in the member states and build the strong coalitions also there. With those words, I would invite Naila to come and do the final concluding words also. Yes. You even have your sign there. I put it there before so that you can. There we go.
Okay. Well, colleagues, today was the last day of the project that we have been working on since, I think, 2 years at least, successful whistleblowing channels. And we started this conference yesterday, and I was happy with this last panel. That is not the the closing of our work on whistleblower, but also the future and telling us how we should deal with this topic in the future. But first of all, I would like to say that Eurocadres developed many guides on whistleblower. You have seen the blue and white one that we received yesterday, I think, whistleblower in European companies and whistleblower internal reporting channels. There was also a report that was written by Vigilanza, but there's also an online learning tool. I hope that all of you are aware of this online tool. It's on our website, but also on the platform. And this is really useful for us, for our colleagues at work, and for trade union representatives at the workplace to know how, what should be known in this topic. And what we have been saying since yesterday is that it's not only, the importance is not only how we transpose this directive in the member state, but also how to deal with it at the workplace. And I think that this online learning tool, it's a bit long, 9 hours, right? Yeah, but you don't have to do it once, so you can stop and come to the next day. It's very useful for all our colleagues in our different countries. Yesterday, Vigilanza explained to us a little bit about how to help the findings of the projects, how to help for the implementation of the whistleblower internal channels. And she said some words I noted also on my page, because I like them very much and very relevant at the workplace, is establishing not only speak up culture, but also listening culture. And this is something that we see in our companies that is lacking. Even when people are ready to speak, there's no one to listen. So here's the importance of the trade unions, and Vigilanza talked about the importance of the positions of the trade unions that can be very different in different member states. Hopefully, after this conference and after this project, we see the importance that we should have a similar position on this issue, but also the importance of making bridges between civil society, academia, and trade unions. And we could see at European level that it was a success. Yesterday, we had a panel talking about the challenges and risks with setting up and designing whistleblower channels and the role of the trade unions and the public authorities. We talked about how we use the ISO 37002 with the transposition of the directive, and the importance of proactive risk assessment to prevent retaliation. We also discussed about the importance of the confidentiality and the need for information to employees on how, where, and what to report. Yesterday, also with Sophie, we talked about the importance of our role to stop the isolations of whistleblowers at the workplace and to guarantee the treatment of the alert once it's out. So it's all about the speaking culture and the listening culture, of course, So we also talked with a panel that was organized by Blueprint for Free Speech that I thank warmly to organize this last panel yesterday. We talked of the importance of the recognition of the trust. This is something also that we should keep in mind when we deal with the alerts at the workplace. And providing training and information to employees on how internal reporting channels work. And I think one colleague of mine has highlighted the fact that many managers do not know when it exists. At least, for instance, in France, we have Loi Sapin 2 and we have internal reporting channels. So many of them do not know that they exist. And even if they know that they exist, they do not know how to use them. So this is one of our duties also, to explain to our colleagues what is it about. There was also, they highlighted also the importance of the anonymity. And yeah, clearly we can see that media channel that is after the what the journalist highlighted yesterday, they need to make the alert outside of at the media channel that could be relevant from their point of view. Today, IDA presented to us the whistleblower monitoring system that is developed by Eurocadres, WIN, and Transparency International. EU. Okay. So to make sure that member states take their responsibilities in these transpositions, so IDA told us that we have still 56 days. So I just feel I have to run away and do my work. And it's only 23 countries are in progress and 4 has not started yet. So this is alarming. And we need to get in, we see now that we need to get engaged in this process, and the monitor is a very good tool to show us where we are, and it's good to see it. We discussed also today the importance of public sector and internal reporting channels, and we discussed the situation in Netherlands, Germany, and Romania. And last but not least, this recap of the 5-year whistleblower journey. I would like to thank you for this roundtable and for all the advices and lessons that we can learn from this, how many, 5 years? Yeah, 5 years work. So what I could learn is, first of all, we should never give up. We saw that the Whistleblower Directive could somehow repair the damages that the Trade Secret Directive could have. So this is, for me, this is a very important lesson. So once we get something where we're not happy at all, in French, I would say it in French because I don't know how to say it in English. In French, we say, on nous sort par la porte, on rentre par la fenêtre. I don't know how to translate this. So, yeah, okay, thank you.
When the door closes, a window opens.
Exactly, so when the door closes, the window opens. So this is something we have to keep in mind, not only on this subject, but also on any other topic we deal with. We learned also that it's very important to share the information, and the diversity of the different stakeholders that deal with this topic can be only enriching. We also learned the importance of the collective efforts. And this is something I've been highlighting since yesterday or before even. It's very important for us that we work collectively on this issue, but also the need to organize the bridges at the national levels. I know this is not a very easy task to do, but let's start doing this. Thank you very much, and have a nice afternoon and a nice weekend. I hope you enjoyed your 3 days in Madrid for those who were here since the beginning of the Congress, and hope to see you very soon.